Now, Cognac may be a protected place and only made from allowed grape varietals, as well as having mandatory aging in oak for at least 2 years, but there are also strict regulations on the distillation processes, both with regard to still type and the way they are run. These standards have set a benchmark for quality and operational technique that pot still spirit production around the world has often borrowed, or stolen if you happen to be French. Just a note that you should be pretty solid on your still technology and theory, especially regarding pot stills, before jumping in here. But let's go. So while Scottish single malt whiskey mandates copper pot stills, Cognac does too, but Cognac takes it further and mandates the actual type and size of the pot stills used. Unlike Scotland, they also mandate the heating method and the number of distillations. The other big difference between a grain-based distillation and these grape-based ones is that malt and other grains are a pretty consistent and shelf-stable product to use as a raw material. Your distillation can happen throughout the year and your grains are ready whenever you are. Here in Cognac, we have all the year's base wines being harvested and fermented over 5 to 6 weeks, with not only notable variety within these base wines, but they also change over just a few weeks in storage prior to distillation. Any wine drinkers know once you expose an open bottle to air, things can change over a pretty short period of time. With a variety of inputs, that can't help but mean a variety of outputs, and also that the distiller is tweaking cuts and run parameters according to those inputs. And all the distillation has to be done by the end of March by law. Let's first look at the mandated pot stills in Cognac, our Alembic Charentais stills. We'll do an overview before going into detail in each section. The Alembic Charentais stills have some mandated elements. Starting with the heat to the pots, it must be directly heated, usually gas burners instead of wood. The still must be constructed of copper and have a chapiteau instead of the swan neck on other pot stills. Notice that removing the chapiteau is how you get access to cleaning the pot that is encased in a brick oven basically. What they call the swan neck, or Col de Cynge, on these stills equates to the line arm, which moves the vapors from the pot to the condenser. Often on the way to the condenser, the Col de Cynge passes through a tank. This acts as the still's charging vessel. That's holding the wines, or low wines, destined to go into the pot on the next batch. This allows for energy savings in heating them up before they go into the pot. The condenser must also be a worm tub condenser. No shell and tube condensers are allowed in Cognac. Cognac mandates double pot distillation. So let's look at the first distillation, or the première chauffe. This première chauffe can be done in a larger pot than the second one, or bonne chauffe, up to 140 hectoliters in size, with a max fill of 120 hectoliters. These guys therefore can be pretty big, on par with those used as wash stills in Scotland, like a 3,700 gallon capacity with a 3,200 gallon fill allowed. Direct heat means a big opportunity for Maillard reactions in the pot, or scorching if you're not careful. Remember the lees that may be in the wine input? More and different Maillard reactions occur when lees are also present. So we fire up this première chauffe, and for most pot distillations around the world, our low wines, or in French, our broullis, are the only output besides the leftover waste. Pot ale in Scotland, or what's called vinasse. Easy to remember word for us, with vin going in and the waste is vin ass, I guess. Anyway, in Cognac, however, we do cuts on the first distillation. So in addition to the broullis, we usually have heads and tails, or translated to French, we have the tête, or heads, and the queue, or tails. The têtes are almost always sent back to the charging vessel prior to the next première chauffe. Now, not everyone collects queues here, but they would go back to the charging vessel as well. Our broullis, or low wines, are at the 27 to 30% ABV, as you'd expect. Now we go to the bonne chauffe, or good distillation. And similar to Scotland, we often use a smaller pot after the wash still. In Cognac, the second still cannot be as big as the première chauffe, with a capacity of only 30 hectoliters with a max fill of 25 hectoliters, about 660 gallons or so quite a bit smaller. We fire up the bonne chauffe again with direct heat, and things get complicated. Our têtes come off first, and they get recycled all the way back to the charging vessel for the première chauffe, so do our queues or tails. We have a second tail cut between the queues and cœur, or heart, called the seconde. These get recycled back to the charging vessel on the première and or the bonne chauffe. Our cœur, or heart, often called eau de vie, water of life, are collected and can't be higher than 72.4% ABV. Off this goes to barrels and fini. Well, not quite. Even though these rules seem strict without a lot of wiggle room, there is more flexibility than you might imagine. Say you are Martell in Cognac and your style is lighter and fruitier than others. The Martell style is to take those secondes all the way back to the wine stage and run them through the première chauffe, giving more distillations to get the group 3s removed. Remember, the group 3s tend to give spirits a coarse texture and sharpness. We are aiming for character, of course, and only have 2 distillations, which will certainly give character, but not always a division of fractions that we want. Also, if we want fruity and light character, as in the Martell method, we aren't going to send those lees through our première chauffe either. We'll make sure those have been removed first. If the lees, remember those dead yeast cells, are present in the première chauffe, the heat will disintegrate and break down the yeast cell walls, releasing fatty acids, fusel alcohols, and amino acids. And remember, these are the building blocks of esters. Esters which can form here, esters from Maillard reactions due to the direct heat on the pot, or these ingredients can make it all the way to maturation, where esters can also form during this time. Not only potential complexity, but a texture or richness can arise as well. This all sounds great, unless again you are after that cleaner, more pure, fruit-driven style. Not really part of the Martell method, but if we are wanting that style, the time of the distillation can make quite a difference too. We're all used to the notion of wine getting better with age because we understand it changes with time. As mentioned earlier, it can change in a very short period of time with exposure to air. If we're making or buying in our eau de vie with designs on that light fruity style, the early distilled spirits coming right after harvest will have a brighter, clean fruit and apple character and a leaner texture. Hence, we're going to mandate that we get eau de vie made earlier in the season. The same wine, just used later in the year, as in distilled closer to the end of March, is going to have a more mouth-filling texture and more aromas of raisin, as well as just seem richer. Rémy Martin style is a richer, more earthy one, so the secondes only go back to the low wines or broullis, and they prefer the lees to be in the wines at that première chauffe. The other tweak distillers use in Cognac to reduce those tailsy group 3s is to just shut the still down before all the ethanol is extracted. Yes, that leaves a little bit of ethanol in the vinasse, but your style might be worth it. And if your brand fetches high dollar in return, the economics will pay off despite the waste. So it's a battle for good character or refined character without bad character. While fermentation is the driver of fatty acids and alcohols, having the lees in makes for more fatty acids and different alcohols being developed in distillation, which can increase esterification in that distillation process. And these same fatty acids and alcohols, the group 3 fusel alcohols, can lead to esters being created in maturation. So the sharpness or coarseness at eau de vie stage can translate to complexity and richness after years of aging. Now, while group 3s are always a concern for distillers, especially in pot distillations, buildup of these in the stills is less of a concern in Cognac, since we're only blasting out this entire production cycle, including fermentation, in half a year. We do a deep clean in the summer before it starts up again in the fall. And all we're doing now is just sitting back and watching our eau de vie magically become cognac. Well, not quite, but that's for another lecture. This lecture should have illustrated how cognac is distilled, what a distiller's options are in making eau de vie. The science of recycling heads and tails and esterification within cognac should now be understood. And you should also recognize the mandated still type and the associated production restrictions in cognac and how you can still be creative within these rules. See you next time.